What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to 8 Cubes. I'm Cam Best, he's Lambie Series. We're going to talk about the 8 most important topics in Marvel Snap, and we're going to start with the card coming out in a few hours. This card will release on Tuesday at the season reset. It is, of course, Toxin, a 2-1 with the ability to send all the other cards at the location you play it back to your hand and gain 2 power for each of them. This is as favorable a meta for a bounce card with low power on the baseline as we've ever had. This is a card that I would expect to go into the Agent Venom bounce deck, and the Agent Venom bounce deck is a very solid option. It goes in the AV bounce deck, it might go in the AV Sarah deck, it might go in the AV Gwenpool Grandmaster deck as well. This is a deck that this is an archetype or multiple archetypes that are really going to want to be able to do what this card is doing right now. Here's the other thing this card will do is make Shadow King even more prominent than it
Yeah.
already is. So, Lambie, what are your preliminary thoughts on the card Toxin?
Okay, first, I love bounce. Okay, you know that already. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so this is basically in bounce like your so-called second Falcon, second Beast, third overall enabler of the archetype. Like I'm less interested. I mean, it's good, right? Getting the +2 for each card you return, so it's like what plus it's a 2/7 a lot of the time when you bounce 3 cards. But I'm just way more interested in the fact that it's just another enabler for the bounce deck because like since the beginning of time, I feel like bounce sometimes we always have this thing whereby when we were playing bounce, we always like, oh, I need to draw my beast now. If not, like it's too late. I need to draw my falcon now. If not, it's too late. Like you gotta draw them before turn like 5, right? So you can bounce everything and replay them on turn 6. This is just one more card in your 12 card deck. So effectively your entire deck is like 1/4 bouncing your stuff back. So I feel like you never miss now. Like it's kind of like low-key a bit impossible to not have a bounce card before turn 5. So I think this is very welcome in the bounce deck, which also backs the question, which is because the bounce deck is so tight already,
Yeah.
right? So what are we actually cutting? Because you want to have bouncers and you want to have stuff to bounce. So like you're already running Agent Venom, you run 3 bounce cards, that's 4 cards. Then you need to run 1 drops to bounce, and then you need to run a bit of a top end, like maybe it's Iron Man or Monkey or Sage, or I don't know, move bounce is even more stuff, right? So I feel like what are we cutting? What is the worst card? I mean, like, I think people will be very interested to like comment like what they think is the worst card in the comments. But I'm very curious, like, KM, what do you think is like the worst thing that we can remove from this deck? Is it like a 1 drop? Because
In
this can bounce non 1 drops.
in the stock list, I think it's Bishop. I think
Oh wow.
you're looking for you get points off of this instead of off of Bishop, right? How often is Bishop bigger than a 2/7? Some amount of the time. But he's also kind of unplayable because of his 3 cost a decent amount of the time as well. This is a 2 cost card that scales up higher and does more what you want to do. I think it's Bishop if it has to be anything. It could also be Black Swan, I think is a possibility
Ooh.
here. I'm not sure it would be Black Swan, but I think it could be Black Swan. Those are the 2 leading contenders for me. But what I'm interested in with this card specifically is it's so obviously good that I wonder if it's going to be overrated. Where it's like,
Ooh.
this is such an obviously good card, but is it less valuable than we think because it is simply a redundancy piece? Or is it just one of those cards that's going to come out and everyone's going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe it. They just played an 11 power dude, and then they beasted that lane, and then they did it all again. And it was just like, oh, okay, I get it. That's really, really strong. My instinct, it's going to be really, really strong. Like
Yeah.
I expect it to be really strong. But I do sort of also think, maybe it's possible that it ends up a little overrated rather than anything else. I don't exactly know. Will this push bounce in different directions? Is the other question. Does having this additional stuff push me to be more of a move bounce deck to win those mirrors? Do I want to be a Human Torch scalar deck because I want to win those mirrors and throwing priority by having all these extra bounce cards in there is the best way to do it? Maybe that's true because bounce mirrors can often be won by throwing priority and having more points. That is a distinct possibility that with extra bouncers in there, we end up being a more points focused deck and a less interaction focused one. I don't know. There's really a lot to contemplate when it comes to what this card will do, but I do expect it to be best friends with anything running Agent Venom and anything running Beast, with the notable possible exception of the best Agent Venom deck, the Iron Man deck. I don't think it goes there, actually.
Yeah, I actually want to add one thing because you mentioned the whole bishop cut potentially. I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you look at the deck, like in terms of you look at the deck in terms of 6 turns, right? 6 turns of a Marvel Snap game. Like turn one, you play a 1-drop. Turn two, you play Agent Venom. I feel like every other turn you are either playing a 1-drop and bouncing, or playing a 1-drop or bouncing, and then
Hmm.
on the final turn you play everything. So bishop really kind of just, you're right, kind of just feels like you never have time to play the bishop. And like, so I guess the question is whether an additional bouncer is better than the bishop.
Yeah.
My instinct is yes, but we'll see.
Scorn in review is a genuinely decent card, and discard is a genuinely playable deck. And what I mean by that is that Scorn has brought discard to a level where I would no longer feel embarrassed to queue it into basically anything. The worry about discard, though, is again, it is a points deck, and we are going into a potential toxin deluge here, where people are going to be doing tons and tons and tons of points. And I don't know if discard can keep up with a toxin bounce deck. So when we talk about the week in review, unfortunately, we have to look ahead to toxin as well. I have found that discard has been able to keep up on points with way more decks than you'd honestly expect. Like, I have been genuinely surprised at how much better discard is with Scorn in it than the alternative. If you are a discard sicko, if you were like, damn, I really missed not getting Proxima last time and I don't want to make the same mistake, I think Proxima is a great comparison. It makes the deck better. It doesn't make it tier 1, but it makes it playable into a variety of situations. That's where I'm at with Scorn.
Yeah, so for Scorn, I think this card as a whole right now, because the most common like counters in the meta game right now are like Alioth, Cosmo, that kind of thing, right? Like if you just plop a Dracula down there, right? Like there's really no real interaction outside of like Red Guardian, right? In a sense. So I feel like this card does have quite a bit of points that is non-interactable still, and that gives it some edge. I don't think this card is tier 1, but I do think that having big stats that is a little bit uninteractable compared to some of the other decks that are popular right now gives it like some level of edge in certain sense.
Yeah, and I think that it is a deck that is not like Hella-esque, because it's got these weird hands where nothing ever actually happens. But when you're actually taking game actions on turns 3 and 4, you end up feeling really good about everything you're doing. Like, I think that this deck is probably around zoo level point output. That's sort of where I'm at with it. And Zoo has the same issues, right? Where if you're not really snowballing, you're not actually going to get to that level of point output. Discard has the same dynamic there. And I think that that is important to point out because it's a confusing and finicky deck to play. And you expect it to be like a very straightforward and obvious one, but it really isn't because of the way you have to manage your hand, your targeted discards, the risks you have to take. There's a lot in the deck that is unique and weird. And I think that that is absolutely a plus and not a minus. I worry it won't be able to keep up on points, but honestly, Scorn, if you were sad you missed out on Proxima and you just wanted to play like a discard deck where everything was a discard card, you probably can pick this card up and not feel too terrible about it. That's where I'm at with it. Oh, but one final note. Discard has, I think, officially gone out of the realm of being a budget deck. This is no longer a budget
Yeah.
deck. It's not anything like that because you need Proxima, you need Scorn, you need all of these cards that go in this deck that are expensive, unfortunately. And so it would not be worth picking up Scorn if you don't have the rest of the deck. Because I don't think that you can play this deck while making sacrifices. It is close to good. I would say it is good in full form. But every little percentage point you lose by not having the exact card that you need for this is very meaningful because discard is such a synergy based deck. There are not a lot of good replacements. There is no backup Proxima. You have to play like Wolverine, which is terrible. And so if you do not have the cards to play this, I would not recommend purchasing Scorn. Let's talk about nerf predictions. Lambie suggested that I offer some to him, and he sort of rates them on a scale of 1 to 5. So that's what we're going to do there. We're going to say 1 is unlikely, 5 is very likely, and I'm just going to throw some at you. All right. A nerf to Storm War Machine Legion, either making Storm more expensive, getting rid of the ongoing on War Machine, or making Legion more expensive. Any of those, do you think that's likely?
I think out of those three cards, okay, so my first opinion that I'm very sure of, very
Mm,
sure meaning my opinion still, not 100%. I think Storm won't change because
okay,
it's 3 mana 2/2. It's a weak card. It's a weak card with a strong effect that's only strong paired with other things. In general, I don't think it's a very strong card because the stat line is horrible, right? So I think Storm won't change. Legion at a 5/7, I think it's also fine. Stat line wise is fine. The effect is there's a lot of player agency with the effect because Legion as a card allows you to play with the 13th card with your deck. I say this very often, which is locations. So I feel like it's a card that's like worth keeping around and staying the same. So now I'm going to War Machine. I feel like War Machine can lose a power. It's either it
sure.
loses its power or it loses the ongoing. I think losing the ongoing might be a bit harsh because once the moment it loses its ongoing, then I think no one's gonna play the card ever. So I feel like if people want to play the card, I guess just lose. It could even lose. No, losing 2 power, I think is gonna be
That's
unplayed
what I was
as
thinking
well.
about, right? Like,
Yeah,
what if we
yeah,
what if
so
we just took 2 power off a War Machine?
it will be unplayed still. Yeah, it's too much. It's too much. 4/5. 4/5. It's played, but I guess if they want to nuke the deck without like making War Machine a complete ass card, 4/4 with the ongoing is the worst. I think it can go.
Sure. Next issue to address is the AV Iron Man deck, which is actually very difficult to address because a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
things you do to counter it are counteracted by Cosmo. It has a lot of the similar dynamics to the old Shuri deck, where if you want to try to interact with this, Cosmo is saying no, and it can afford to run Cosmo because the point output it gets from all of its other stuff is so high. And that's actually the thing that I think people miss about that deck is not every deck like that can afford to run Cosmo because not every deck like that has an Agent Venom, or in the case of the Madam Web stuff, not every deck like that has a dagger that gets to 12 points just for free, right? Like these decks that are able to run Cosmo now are able to do so because their massive point packages are subsidizing their ability to run that card. They can pre tech for people trying to beat them. And that is a really tough ask, I think, in terms of how to fix it. My instinct is the place to attack is probably Claw, but I don't know what to do about that because when I look at you have this Claw package, right? And when you look at like what other cards you could play instead of Claw, it's basically just Darkhawk, and that makes the deck a lot worse because Darkhawk has these associated deck building costs of Korg and Rockslide that it has to run. So you are able to like if you get Claw out of that deck somehow, you can be in a good spot in terms of there are not a lot of other options for that deck to run. There's not a lot of like other Mystique targets that it can reasonably have. And I think that's what I would try to do. Here's the thing, I don't know how to get Claw out of the deck. You can't make the power
Yeah,
lower because that's what Agent Venom is making up for in the first place. And so it's like,
yeah.
what are we actually supposed to do about this deck? Because I
I
feel like that is a weak point, but I don't know how to fix it.
I personally will not want to touch Claw because I feel like it's been like obsolete for a long time and then
Yeah.
they recently buffed it and then like it's good for the new player experience, right? To have a good 5 cost card that's like not expensive. You know, it's practically almost free if you just play the game. So like I feel like I don't want to touch
I
Claw
don't
simply
either.
because it hurts the new player experience. I feel like there's two candidates and it's like honestly a bit two different decks. But
Mm,
Agent Venom I think is one of the prime candidates
yes.
that could be hit. Uh I don't think you can nuke it into Oblivion because firstly it's a season pass card. I think maybe you keep the effect but it loses power, is what I think. Or you could also make it a 3/4, which is because sometimes when you play that deck, you also can play Tina on turn 2, right? So then you play Agent Venom on turn 3. It's definitely worse, but everything else being buffed by 4 in your deck for one turn later, I guess it's still okay. You know, but I don't think you can reduce the effect to be like change it into like everything becomes 3 power. That's just bust, but and then like no one will play the card, I feel. So I feel like 4 power, the 4 power like effect needs to stay, but I guess we can like either increase the cost of Agent Venom by 1 or it loses like a power or 2. I feel like Agent Venom at a 2/2 will still see play though. Right? I think we'll still see play. Another target that I want to talk about, which is quite interesting because there's these like early move packages, right? The Arania, Madam Web,
Yeah.
like move stuff. I feel like I would want Madam Web to be 2/0. Okay, so my reasoning for Madam Web 2/0 is because the difference between 1 and 0 and -1 is very big, right? -1 you lose a location, 0 it doesn't do anything, and 1 you
Priority.
can win a location
Yeah.
with 1 power, right? So if Madam Web is a 2/0, it's impossible for her location to be won with just her. I know it's gonna sound crazy, but if you're moving stuff here and there, left and right, there is a chance that because Madam Web is a 2-1, your opponent needs to put a thing there to beat it. But if it's a 2-0, they don't. So I feel like Madam Web at 2-0 actually makes some sense, because the move stuff kind of moves around a lot of stuff, but it's like one big thing that's moving, and then the Madam Web is sitting alone. So I feel like maybe 2-0 could be something for Madam Web.
I think if you wanted to nerf Madam Web, that would be a good way to do it. But I will also tell you, I think they don't want to nerf Madam Web, and I'll tell you why. Madam Web to me is the new Loki. Madam Web is a card that is so good for good players and so medium everywhere else. I would not be shocked if Madam Web had like a 5% higher win rate in like the top 15 than she did everywhere else. Like, this is a card that, if you are really good at using it, is one of the best cards in the game, but very few people are that good at using it. And for that reason, I feel like it's probably like, it's like Pixie, right? Remember when Glenn came on my show and was like, Pixie kind of sucks and we want to buff her, and then like the next week she was busted? It's like, it's kind of like that, where it's like the card is too strong in the right hands to ever change, and too weak in the wrong hands to ever be nerfable.
Yeah, but I feel like so the thing is, like, I feel like in the right hands is too small a group of people. Like,
It is a
like
small
I feel
group.
like it's a too small group of people, so I feel like they can possibly nerf it, because the people who have it in the wrong hands are probably the majority compared to the people that have it in the right hands. So like,
what I'm saying is, they'd probably rather buff it because most people can't use it right. So like, there's probably no justification to nerf it, because if most people aren't winning with it, what's the point, right? They don't want to balance around like the 50 people who are really good at this game. They have no desire to do that.
Right. So you're saying that it's less likely that it will happen because it's only really helping a small sample size. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, if you polled like the current rank 1 through 50, they would all probably tell you the card is really good. If you looked at stats on Untapped for the card, they would probably tell you the card is not very good. And I think that's like that's the Loki comp that I'm trying to make. And that's what makes it hard to actually, I feel like, get a nerf across the line. Like, I feel like if you asked Glenn, like, hey, why aren't you nerfing it? He'd be like, well, it has a 48% win rate for most players. And it's like,
makes sense.
Yeah, I understand why you wouldn't nerf that card. That's sort of where I'm at with the move package. I think the move package is actually just safe because of the skill, like the skill application that it requires.
Agree.
Next up, we are going to transition back from a high voltage world into the real world once again. I guess we just sort of wanted to be your tour guides back to Marvel Snap. Welcome. You're allowed to retreat here. Welcome. Gambit combo is actually a bad deck here. Welcome back to the real world, where your losses unfortunately matter a lot. We are going to be bereft of high voltage after the patch, or after the reset that allows Toxin to come out. And I just sort of wanted to do a little bit of a retrospective, because the initial opinion of this mode was very high. I feel like everyone was like, that this is great, no misses, I love it. But I think a lot of that initial opinion, it did seem to be, was about how easy it was to get the free stuff out of the mode. Thank you for the rewards. I appreciate it. I enjoyed playing it while it lasted. I'm glad it's gone. I don't want to have to grind this. And I guess I wanted to sort of double down on that and talk about what it means that they created a mode that is good and playable, but fundamentally players will reject every attempt to force them to play a mode, unless it's easy. And I think that might inform their future decisions on game modes like this.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's not even a minus though. Like, let me just say this. Like, so this is a temporary mode, right? It's like an event, Like they've done events like in the past. They did Post Diner long ago. You guys had Nexus Events, and that was bad, right? I didn't
that was not an event, though. Actually, were you weren't there for that, right?
I wasn't there.
Okay.
Yes.
The reason I think that people got so mad, it wasn't just the gacha mechanics. It's that they actually expected them to be an event. Like, they messed up naming them. A Nexus event in Marvel is like an incursion from another dimension. That's what it's referred to as. but they named him Nexus Events to give it like a lore-friendly name. And so everyone was like, oh my god, there's going to be an event we can do to get cards. And then it was just spending money, and everyone was so mad.
I mean, the event was to use your credit card, right? That was the
Yes.
event.
Yes.
Okay, no, but like get back to the point. I feel like okay, so high voltage. I feel like it's good because like it's a one-off thing that happens from time to time. I feel like
Mhm.
in the future it's probably gonna be like something else, but I think they can do it in this like way though, whereby this thing appears for a while, like interesting mechanic, gets you a free card and then disappears. Like I feel yes, people will get bored. Like I did mention in our previous video that like I love high voltage, but if I have to do high voltage every week, I will get bored for sure. So I feel like this is one of those like breath of fresh air things that they need to introduce here and there. But like obviously it cannot be too often because it will just become boring, right? Like I feel like near the tail end of high voltage, like maybe even now, people already are starting to get bored of the mode, which makes a lot of sense, right? Because as much as spending a lot of mana is fun, doing wombo combos it's fun. It's only fun because normally you don't get to do it. And then once you do it too much, you get bored of doing it and then just want to do like more try hardy or normal things again. So it's just a perception thing, I feel. So like as long as they like space out these events, I think the reception will be good. Based off of this one. Just that not too often, you know.
Yeah. And I did want to mention one final thing about High Voltage and Deadpool's Diner that this is kind of a whale complaint, but I do have it
Okay.
and I will make it. I don't know why I have to wait a week to just spend tokens on the card. I have 70,000 tokens. Just let me use them, dude. Like stop making me jump through hoops if I want to just wail on this
No, do you
card.
know why? It's
Why?
because there's so many whales in this game that like if all of you just decide to spend your tokens, no one plays the mode,
That's
man.
not even true. Like they probably make more money from making us spend our tokens to get the card earlier. Like
Not
I don't
wrong.
know why they would not want me to spend money. Like I don't understand it. Like it isn't the goal of this game to extract money from me. And they're like, nah, no, 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 we're good.
They don't
Dude,
want it
just
to
let me
seem
spend
that way,
money.
man.
Just let me
They
spend
don't want it to
money.
seem that way.
Like, come on.
All right.
One of the major evolutions in the past week has been the rise of Misery Phoenix Force Darkhawk. And with Misery slated to receive a buff, I don't know if they've specified what it's going to be, but like probably to 4-8. Do you remember last week where I was like, they'll never buff Misery? I don't know how they could possibly do that. Yeah, it turns out I'm wrong and dumb and bad. And it turns out they are going to be able to buff Misery. And I'd like to talk about what that might mean for this deck and if there are going to be any associated changes along with it. Like, if they're buffing Misery, how good does this deck become? Does it have to continue to be a Darkhawk deck? Are there other things we can do at that top end? I don't really think the answer is yes, because we are a Black Widow deck first and foremost. But what I'm almost wondering about is like, is that Black Widow Misery Grandmaster thing the kind of thing that can go in other decks? Like, remember when we were bouncing Black Widows? I mean, Toxin
Yeah.
might let us do that a little bit. Like, I don't
True.
know.
True.
I guess my thought process is it possible for us to get that into other shells, or does it have to exist only in this one? Jet's been messing around with this deck a lot. He's tried a bunch of different stuff. My favorite configuration is the one with Echo, but he's currently on the one with Armor and White Widow. And you know, I get where he's coming from there because what he's trying to do is get more beef into the deck. And I've been trying to do the same thing. And that's the difficulty of it. This is a deck that has such a powerful denial strategy, but when you aren't denying them their resources, you are a much worse mid-range deck than everything you play against. And so it's sort of difficult to end up with a cohesive deck that's always doing the right thing. That said, I've got like a 2/3 win rate with this deck this season. Like it's been very good for me.
Yeah, so when you talk about Jet and Phoenix Force, this is the funny thing because Jet is like a super close friend of mine from the Marvel Snap community, right? The last time he did Phoenix Force stuff, like the only time that the deck was ever good was when he was playing it.
Yeah.
So like because it was too difficult for any normal human, including myself, to play it. So I feel like this version of the deck is a little bit of like what he does as well. Like the deck only really works when things come together, right? Like when you draw the Misery. If you don't draw the Misery, the deck is like way worse, that kind of thing. Like it's his very style of deck. So I would say that this kind of deck you benefit more from this deck if you are good at snapping and retreating, I would say, because like the highs are very high and the lows are absolutely low. So but I do want to say though that like Phoenix Force it's well, such an evolution, right? Like Phoenix Force just used to be the one big wombo combo
Yes.
multiple man thing. Now Phoenix Force is an okay. I don't think enabler is the right word. I think Phoenix Force is like an accessory
Yeah, it's a
to like
value
a
card.
good. It's a value card now, which is really interesting because I saw glimpses of this in the old Phoenix Force deck as well, right? Where like the old Phoenix Force deck could do like what's that called? Nico Minoru with Phoenix being revived by Phoenix Force and then you double it, that kind of thing. So that's already like an accessory to what the Phoenix Force deck previously was. So now Misery Phoenix Force is also like an accessory to like I guess maybe the Darkhawk package and stuff like that, you know. So I actually think this deck can still evolve. And I think there's actually quite a few ways to evolve it because there's like so many things you can do with Misery, right? In the sense of like re-triggering on reviews and stuff like that. So definitely somewhere to explore with this.
Yeah, the curve of, you know, Black Widow, Misery, Phoenix Force, triple Black Widow is
Mm.
devastating. It's a devastating thing to do to people. And that's just to say nothing of, like, you know, sometimes you're getting like extra hoods and things like that too. It's just unbelievably powerful. And that kind of strength is a real unique thing for this deck to have. And it's a very strong deck. Okay, so where the hell is Wicken? That is what this topic is about. I feel like there has to be some sort of good Wiccan deck. A lot of my Wiccan
Yes.
decks have been aimed at being US agent decks because the way I like to approach being a Wiccan deck is to take aim at the other mid-range decks that I run into. So I have like Ajax US agent Wiccan decks that are running around. I play a lot of those. And I will say that I feel like Wiccan is a little bit underrated right now. And I feel like he's a little bit underplayed right now. Maybe he's like the flavor of last month, but this is a metagame, especially when people are like playing Claw Iron Man stuff, where
Mm-hmm.
like a turn 5 Eliath can be really mean. A turn 5 Eliath can be really game winning against that kind of stuff. And I think that especially like there are these like, you know, bounce decks that like set up a hit monkey that they plan to beast on turn 5, you Eliath that, you instantly win. Like, there's just a lot of value in being able to do that right now. And I feel like Wicken is a deck that can be good again. And I really want to see. I mostly put this on you because, like, I want to see some movement on that. Here's my worry, of course, is that the second Toxin comes out, this becomes untrue again. Like,
Yeah.
that's distinctly possible because the bounce decks are just so good at going wide in ways that 1/6 drop cannot beat.
Yeah, so I agree that there should be like okay, I mean Toxin's gonna come out soon, so maybe not by then, but like
Mhm.
now at least it's a bit sad that like now we don't see more Wiccan decks because I feel like this meta can be a Wiccan deck meta as well. Because the thing about Wiccan is that I actually really like the card and I really like the way the deck plays. So firstly, it simplifies your snaps as well because like you know we talked about it a few videos back whereby if you have the perfect curve into Wiccan, you just always have more energy than your opponent after a few turns, right? So that's definitely a snap condition. And if you have more energy than your opponents for the next foreseeable turns, which means your Eliath isn't just an Eliath, right? It's like a very amazing Eliath deck because it's an Eliath plus another card deck, right? You can do Eliath plus another thing like on either like turn 6 or on like turn 5, you know. So like that extra mana you get allows you to do the Eliath thing plus play something else. Could be like Eliath US Agent on like turn 6, which is super powerful, right? So I feel like honestly I don't know whether this will prevail, like you said, after Toxin comes out. But like it's a bit unfortunate that like we don't see more Wicken right now because I really do think that the deck is actually well positioned, you know. Like that extra energy you get from the Wicken. Fun fact, the Wicken is also a 4/7, so it's not like
Yeah.
you lose out on anything. You don't lose out on anything playing the Wicken, you know. If you perfect curve into a 4/7, you probably have a quite a bit of stats, you know, and then you follow up with floodgates like Eliath and then US Agent or just a one cost, I don't know, Hydra Bob or something big, you know, that kind of thing. Like it's a lot of stats and there is negation. So I don't know if this will persist through the Toxin meta, which I think will happen. Like I think the Toxin meta will happen. But like if it does, it'll be kind of nice because I really want to see like some Wiccan decks do something in the meta.
Let's talk about our boy Browday. Browday,
Yes.
one of our friends since way back, won the Marvel Snap Creator Gauntlet. We could not be happier for him. He
Mm-hmm.
did so with a deck that a couple of my friends, Derek and Barzy, have been really trying to bully me to get to like give a little bit more credit, and Browday managed to pull it off for sure. This is, of course, a Super Scroll deck with a bunch of other stats in it. It's on my most recent tier list video. It is in the timestamps as the cook. That's what they call it. And Browday brought it as a sort of recognition of the AV Iron Man deck being the best deck in the game. And it did a typical thing that I like doing a lot of the time too, because there are two real ways to be good into AV Iron Man. Method number one is playing a US Agent deck. Method number two is playing a Super Skrull deck. They're both doing the same thing. You take a mid-range deck, you run US Agent, you run Super Skrull, you run maybe another piece of tech, and then another piece of tech. All these decks also all run Shadow King. It's just you can't count on him because of Cosmo. So you end up having like US Agent, Shadow King, maybe a Rogue or a Red Guardian, and then a mid-range shell. And that's what a lot of the decks I've been succeeding with look like, right? And so this one is doing much the same thing, except it's also running Super Skrull instead of US Agent, which means it is not going to be any kind of Luke Cage Afflict deck, just a Super Skrull normal Gwenpool, Mysterio, Sasquatch, Mockingbird deck. But the ethos here is similar to everything that we've talked about previously, which is you need to have the cards that beat the Iron Man deck through Cosmo, right? Shadow King, you have to have it. You can't leave home without it, even though it gets Cosmoed. We get that. But you also need cards that beat their stuff when they Cosmo you. And that's where Super Skrull and US Agent come in.
Yeah, I feel I'm gonna end up giving like an Oscars level speech for Browdy, so I'm gonna try and keep this as short as possible. Okay, but first, let's just talk about. Firstly, congratulations, Browdy, and I want to say that the Super Skrull idea, like, because I didn't get to play the Creator Gauntlet because of commitments, but I'm very glad that this ended up winning because the deck that I have in my collection was actually like the AV deck with the Super Skrull in it, like.
Mhm.
So that was my take because I feel like Super Skrull or US Agent is like the ultimate like screw you Iron Man card, right? And I wanted the screw you Iron Man card in my deck. So and Super Skrull kind of just like buffs your stuff as well. So yeah, the Super Skrull shoutout was super sick. I think Browdy's deck overall was just better because there's a lot of points as well along with the Super Skrull, right? Because you have like the whole Mockingbird. Like Mockingbird and Sasquatch is just two monstrously huge cards that like you can play behind like Cosmos and stuff like that. You just don't care, you know, it's just so much stats. So shout out there to Barrick and Barzi for making a good deck for Browdy. And also once again, shout out for Browdy for winning, right? Like, I feel like Browdy has been in this community for so long. He's won a ton of like smaller events. He's never really won the big one.
That's not true. He was the guy who got Galactus nerfed.
Yeah, I know he won Galactus he won a tournament with Galactus, but it wasn't like the big like televised events and stuff like that, right? This one is big and televised, you know, like it was like creators from all the around the world competing, and only top 32 got into the final bracket and stuff like that. So Browdy came out on top of all of that, and I'm like super happy for him. Also, the Galactus thing is really hilarious because Browdy made a tweet and he's like thank you Barzi and Derek for helping me choose the deck. You know, Cam and I have been choosing decks for Browdy for 2 years. Like it's a thing. Like
he wins tournaments whenever he gets someone else to pick the deck for him.
Yes. So Browdy has this thing whereby we choose his decks and then he wins. It's been going on for 2 years, and finally he did it at the biggest possible event. So congratulations, Browdy.
I still remember that Galactus conversation where he was like, "What the hell am I supposed to play tomorrow?" And we were just like, you know, the big balls play would be to just take Galactus, and then he didn't lose a game the entire day.
1 year ago, exactly.
It's like, all right. And that's exactly what happened in the finals today. He took the deck that was built for him and did not lose at all. He 10-0'd the final. He was great.
Browdy is a really good pilot, by the way. Like, I don't know. I don't know about all the top like players in the game right now, but when I was super competitive, we were really good at snapping. I think Browdy brings that like ability to snap super well from then till now, and it definitely like you can see, right? I mean, 10 of the final, you can't possibly be bad at snapping to 10 of the final, and heck, to be even in the final, you probably snap like a master. So congratulations, Browdy.
Shout out to Browdy. For those unaware, I did a co-stream of the event, an official co-stream, and during the conversation that I had with the person who provided the co-stream, shout out to Tribe for doing that. For allowing me to do that. Yeah. So the conversation I had was like, all right, so we're starting at 11 a.m. my time. Well, how long do you expect it to go? He was like, well, it probably shouldn't be any longer than 4 hours, as long as nobody plays like Lambie. So, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And it's like, yeah, no, I've heard, it's not just me who thinks this. Like, other people have reported to be like, this guy plays like the slowest of all time. It clearly works for him, but also the slowest player we've ever had to watch. And I honestly, I kind of wanted to save this to drop it on you at the end of the episode and not tell you, but I did tell you just before this started, that I was going to bring this up. What are your general thoughts on being the slow play guy?
Okay, so this is good. Okay, so this is good because my influence has passed on a little bit because okay, I was this very big advocator of the rope snap. I was like, okay, I wasn't the guy that invented it, obviously, but I was a huge promoter of the rope snap in tournaments, right? So what that means is you snap very late, like near the end of the rope, which means you take more time, right? So what this does for you is you actually have to hold. We talked about this in many 8 cubes episodes in the past as well, but like we're bringing it back again. But like we snapping on the rope allows you to have more time to think through your turns. It also makes your opponent like sort of like commit to the turn already. But obviously now there's the undo button, right? Like back then there was no undo button, so this rope snap thing was like way more effective, you know. So I guess it's just a habit that I've had because I played many TCGs. Right? I realized that the best decisions come when you look at things like longer. So I just tend to take my time doing all these kind of stuff, and I feel like it's totally against what Marvel Snap is,
Yes.
which is yeah. So I've brought a brand of play. I brought a brand of play style to this game, which is totally not what Marvel Snap is supposed to be. So I can understand like it left a lasting impression on Tribe because the last time I played one of their events, I probably roped every turn
Yeah.
and it definitely extended the broadcast. But I mean, I did win. So,
Can we
but
put it in fast
the
forward? Like that they should
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. You could watch the VOD in 1.5 times speed and it could be the same speed as the current broadcast right now. So yeah, but whatever it is, yeah, no, so TLDR, I just take long for my turns because I actually take like a lot of time to think about my moves and it's not necessarily needed sometimes. It's just a habit that I have. And yeah, so this is just what I wanted to say. Yeah, I don't think you really need to do that anymore because plus there's also the undo button, so it's less effective. But
Well,
yeah.
the other advantage that taking the whole time on your turns conveys is that if you do it all the time, you set the precedent that you do it all the time, and they can't read into you thinking meaning
Correct.
anything.
Correct.
And like
100%.
that's actually probably the biggest advantage it does convey, which is like when you have a big complex turn that you're thinking about a lot, they don't know that you're thinking about it a lot because you're taking the same amount of time you took on playing Wicken on turn 4. And
Also,
Hmm?
Also, if you take the whole timer to play Wicken on 4, this is the point I'm building up to. You take the whole timer to play Wicken on 4, you annoy your opponent as well because they'll be like, what the heck this guy's doing, man? Do you take the whole timer to play one card that everyone knows you're gonna play? Like it annoys them and then in the tournament it works in your favor. But obviously, if you're not in a tournament, probably just don't do this. You're just gonna annoy people for no reason. But yeah.
Speaking of annoying people for no reason, it's time to end. Thank you so much for watching. I've been Cam Best. He has been Lambie Series, and we will see you in the next one. Take us out of here.
I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode because I did. Thank you so much. Like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye bye.